everyone, how's it going? I'm Twist Games, and welcome back to my playthrough of Project Elimination, Part 7. In the last episode, we finished the investigation, and we learned a little bit more about Ideal Detective. So, if you enjoy this content, give it a like, comment, and subscribe to the channel for more of these playthrough episodes. Now, let's back into it. They also discover how Senior Detective got killed using the chandelier and the wires, so we're going to keep on continuing on with this logic.
地下で老子探偵に絡まった状態のワイヤーを引っ張るにはどのような方法があるだろうか。家族くんならわかるかな?
So what method could have been used to pull the wire once it was wrapped around Senior Detective? Any ideas, Posh?
犯人も少しは知恵を使ったようですけれど、私の高貴な脳細胞にはお見通しでしたわよ。
The culprit may have had a dash of cleverness up their sleeve, but my upper-class intellect saw right through.
ズバリ犯人はシャンデリアの落下を利用してワイヤーを引っ張り上げたのですわ。
Just simply, the culprit used a falling chandelier to pull the wire taut.
シャンデリアの落下を利用するってどうやって？シャンデリアのある場所は1階のエントランスホールですけど、現場は地下室でしょ。
How will they do that? The chandelier's up in its entrance hall, but the crime that took place down in the basement, right?
やれやれ、庶民にもわかるよ。エレガントに説明して差し上げましょう。
Dear me, very well. I shall elucidate the matter so elegantly that even a commoner would understand.
シャンデリアにワイヤーを結びつけて動きが連動するようにしたんだよ。シャンデリアが落下すると自動でワイヤーが巻き上げられる仕組みね。
The wire was attached to the chandelier so they would move in tandem. When the ladder fell, the former would wind up automatically.
ちょっと私に説明させなさい。
Excuse me, the explanation is mine to give. Posh Detective cuts Holmes off with a huff, then continues where she left off.
犯人は老子探偵を薬か何かで眠らせた後、床へと落下させた状態のシャンデリアにワイヤーをくくりつけたのですわ。
After sedating a senior detective, the culprit affixed a wire to the chandelier, which had been lowered to the floor. Okay, that always is a good picture here. Okay. So far that's not a problem.
その後、床の隙間を通してワイヤーをエントランスホールから地下室へと垂らせば準備完了。ワイヤーによって2つの空間がつながったのですわ。
So basically, the biggest problem we have is how did the senior detective get down there? That's a bigger question itself. Then they threaded the wire through the gaps in the entrance hall, for allowing them to connect with the basement.
床にワイヤーを通せるものなんですか?
Would the wire really fit through the floorboards though?
エントランスホールの床は地下に音が届くよう床板に若干の隙間が空いていましたでしょ。細いワイヤーを通して地下に垂らすことは造作もありませんわ。
Certainly, if the cracks are large enough for sound to travel between the two spaces, a thin wire should pose no issue.
地下に届いたワイヤーを老子探偵の体に結びつけた後、シャンデリアを天井へと引き上げれば準備完了。
Once the wire fed down to the basement was wound around senior detective, the chandelier raised back into
シャ
position.
ンデリアが天井から落下すると、その動きに連動してワイヤーも引っ張られるという八つ咲き装置の完成ですわ。
When the chandelier came plummeting down later on, it pulled the wire taut and dismembered the victim in one fell
以
swoop.
上のようにして犯人は自らの手を汚さず犯行時刻の隠蔽も果たした上で老子探偵を殺害してみせたのでしょう。
So what we're saying is, okay, so I get what you're trying to say. Because what her logic is, senior detective already down there, he was been knocked out. And so what they're, okay, so here's what's gonna happen. My character walks through the entrance hall, right? Chandelier falls down. At that point in time, when the chandelier falls down, is when the exact same time happened, the senior detective actually dies. The senior detective's already down there. The problem is, how did the senior detective is already down there? There's nothing there to indicate that how did he get down there, though? But anyways, let's continue on. Avoya. The culprit managed to kill senior detective without carrying their hands and successfully obscured the time of death.
見事な推理だ。しかし確証が欲しいな。ワト君はこのトリックの痕跡を覚えているかい？
Superb deduction, but I'd like some conclusive evidence. Walter, do you remember the trace this gimmick left behind? The trace it left behind. Now that she mentioned, something suspicious did catch my attention during the investigation. Now, she wants proof. I cannot access to the what's it called? Well, I read those last episode. Yeah. Ooh, trust level? I know it's a 5. Armor detective. Something supposed to catch it during the investigation. I say scratching the chandelier. Because there's thin marks that shoot the same way as if something was scratched by something thin. The wall splash turns out its purpose is to hoist up a chandelier trap. So, I'm gonna scratch this chandelier.
シャンデリアに
Get +2. Nice.
ワイヤーがシャンデリアに引っ張られた痕跡だったんですね。
The scratch on the chandelier, no something is left by the wire when it's scraped against the metal.
エクセレント。その通りだよ、ワト君。
Excellent, that's precisely right,
あの
Watto.
シャンデリアの構造はかなり頑強だ。
Wait,
よほど鋭利なものでも使わない限り傷つかない。
she's calling me my real name. She's not supposed to call me my real name. Liar. She's not ideal. Get out of here. The chandelier is quite durable, so if anything were to cause a scratch, it would have to be extraordinarily
そ
sharp.
れこそ鋼鉄すら切断可能なワイヤーでも使わない限りはな。
The wire is so capable of cutting through even steel, perhaps.
ならホームズの言う通り、ワイヤーとシャンデリアの罠が犯行に利用されたことは間違いないだろうね。
That's just like you said, the wire saw the chandelier trap were paired up for this little stunt.
無能君、気分はどうだい？
So, how's it feel, incompetent?
気分どういうこと？
How does what feel?
鈍いな。シャンデリアの罠によって老子探偵が殺されたということはだよ。
So, a little optic, aren't we? What I mean is, how does it feel to know that senior detective was killed by a chandelier trap?
君が洋館の扉を開かなければ老子探偵は八つ咲きにならずに済んだってことじゃないか。
He wouldn't have gotten hacked into pieces if he never opened that door, you know. See? Yeah, see, that's what a piece. But the switch. But someone else has to be in there, but you have to flip the switch in order for the chandelier to come down. Shrug lances through my spine and I began to break in a cold sweat. So it was all because of me. I triggered a trap that senior detective would still be alive. And I could feel the doorknob in my hand to think that the moment a man was being sliced apart right below my feet.
僕が作動させたトラップで
The trap that I triggered.
初めて人を殺してしまった気分はどうだい？まるで泥の沼に浸ったみたいに悪くない気分だろう。大丈夫。すぐになれるさ。
What does your first kill feel? Like sinking into the mud of a swamp pond? Don't worry, you'll get used to it.
下がれ、下道探偵。私がうんと言うまで口を閉じていろ。
Damn. Stand down, renegade detective. Keep your lips shut until I say otherwise.
そんなに睨むなよ。そそられるじゃないか。
Don't glower at me like that. It makes me tingle all over. Okay, weirdo.
警告するのは2度までだ。口を閉じろ。
This is your second and final warning. Shut your mouth. Howled by Holmes, renegade detective seems to cut his losses, backing down. Well, it turns to me, all sides of anger wiped clean from her face.
無能君、動揺するのはわかるが、落ち込むのは後にしよ
I know you're incompetent, but you need to set the grief aside
う。
for
みん
now.
なも無能君を糾弾したり、疑ったりするのは後にしてくれよ。入り口のトラップは他の探偵でも発動は避けられなかったものだ。
The rest of you, save your blame and suspicions. Any of us could have triggered that trap at the door. It was
そ
unavoidable.
れにむしろ、無能君はいい働きをしたと言っていい。無能君の行動のおかげで、犯人の計画は致命的な狂いが生じてしまったんだ。
As a matter of fact, incompetent actually did something remarkable. His actions forced the culprit to make a fatal error.
僕がいい働きを
He did something remarkable. What could she mean by that? As much as I want to demand an answer, I wait to hear the rest of her deduction.
なあ、家族の姉さんよ。犯人はシャンデリアの落下を利用してワイヤーを引っ張ったんだよな。
Yo, Posh, the crook used a fallen chandelier to cinch the wire, right?
ですからそう申していますでしょ。ワイヤーはシャンデリアに連動して。
Yeah, not saying as much. The wire worked in concert with the chandelier.
でもよ、普通にくくりつけたんじゃシャンデリアに合わせてロース探偵が上下の移動を繰り返すだけにならねえか。
But that,
引っ張り上げられた時に殺されたわけじゃねえんだろ。
yeah, but wouldn't that just move his ear up and down with the chandelier? It wouldn't really be enough to kill him, right? What? I mean, he got sliced to pieces, so if you chandelier goes straight down, you get sliced perfectly with the wires, and yeah.
ヤマト君の言いたいことはわかるよ。地下の老子探偵の体を切断するのに必要なのはワイヤーを引っ張り上げる力だからな。
I see what you're saying, Rodney. For the wire to dismember its senior detective, a strong upward force would be required.
落下運動に連動しても切断はできないだろうと言いたいのだろう。
You're suggesting that using the downward momentum of the chandelier wouldn't accomplish that, correct?
落下運動。まあよく言ってることはわからねえけど、多分そんな感じだぜ。
You know, I haven't heard a workaholic's voice yet. That's weird. You would think he would be asking a bunch of questions at this point. The downward momentum, not sure I follow you there, but yeah, something like that.
確かにこれは困ったぞ。一体どうすればいいのかな。解説を頼めるかい、家族くん。
Or this is sticking point. Whatever to do, could you provide us with a rejoinder, Posh?
それはですね。
Ah, she's flustered. Right, you see, the thing is,
布くん、助け舟をあげてくれ。最初に家族くんと推理を行っていたのは誰であったか。
Gourmet was investigating with her, that's right. And through her lifeline confident, do you recall who was initially investigating with Posh? There was only one detective who was initially investigating with Posh to start, and that was Gourmet Detective.
美食さ
Plus
ん、
two.
あなたならシャンデリアの落下を利用して老子探偵を殺害する方法に気づいているんじゃないですか。
Gourmet, am I right to assume you figured out how the chandelier's downward momentum was used to kill the senior detective?
あらあら、美味しいところを取るみたいだから黙っているつもりだったけれど、そういうわけにもいかないようね。
Oh my, you look like you were just about to get to the tasty part, so I didn't want to interrupt, but if you
難
insist...
しい話じゃないわ。犯人は滑車装置の原理でローシちゃんの体とシャンデリアとをワイヤーで結びつけたのよ。
Super used a pulley system to connect the wire and steer your senior along with it to the chandelier. Piece of cake.
そうそれですわ。滑車装置を利用したのですわ。私ってばど忘れしてしまうだなんて。
Of course, they used a pulley system. It was so obvious. I suppose it just slipped my mind. Ho ho ho.
滑車装置って井戸のつれべなどに使われているあれですか。それを使えばどうなるんですか。
A pulley system like what you use in a well? How will that help in this situation?
難しい話じゃないわ。図を描きながら解説してあげるわね。
As tricky as it seems, here, I'll break it down for you with a diagram. I love these diagrams.
シャンデリアの罠は一度落下した後も壁のスイッチを押すとゆっくり天井まで引き上げられることで何度でも使える仕組みだったわ。
No matter how many times the chandelier has been dropped, it can always be raised back up to the ceiling using the wall switch.
この引き上げる力がとってもパワフルでね。人より体重の重い私でも軽々と引き上げてくれたの。
That mechanism can bear considerable weight, so much that was able to lift a voluptuous vixen like myself with ease.
私よりずっと身軽なロースちゃんの体なら重さに加わっても全然平気でしょうね。
Well, seeing the senior up would have been even easier, considering how much lighter he is.
シャンデリアの上に乗って一緒に登ったんですか。
You're saying you rode the chandelier up to the ceiling?
ええ、楽しかったわよ。それに天井の近くで貴重な手がかりも見つけられたわ。
Clue? Oh yes, it was quite the wild ride. Plus, I discovered a juicy clue when I reached the top.
それはワイヤーを引っ掛けていたと思われるフック。それも登山用の強靭なもので凶器のワイヤー層が擦れても平気な材質のね。
Oh, a hook. Okay, that makes sense. It was a hook, the one the wire was probably hung on. It's designed for mountaineering, so it'd be sturdy enough to withstand the tension.
そのフックを通してシャンデリアにワイヤーをくくりつければ簡単な滑車装置の出来上がり。ついでにこの状態でワイヤーを力いっぱい引っ張ればワイヤーの緩みも調整できるわ。
With wire draped over the hook, then tied to chandelier, you could adjust the slack in the wire with a sharp jerk. So what she's saying is the culprit already had me inside the building when my guy walked in on top of this chandelier to order this working.
ロースちゃんは天井に貼り付け状態で何もできなかったはず。恐ろしいトリックよね。
This here would have been bound to the ceiling, unable to do a thing. What a horrible trick.
老子探偵の獅子に見られた絵師の痕跡は相当長い間天井に貼り付け状態だった証拠だな。ゾッとしないよ。
Traces of necrosis on senior detective's limbs indicate that he was pinned up there for quite some time. I showed her to think of it.
滑車装置さえ作ってしまえばロープを使うなりしてシャンデリアから降りて準備は完了。誰かが扉を開くのを待つだけというわけですわね。
With this pulley system in place, all that would remain is to descend the chandelier with a rope and wait for someone to open the door.
降りるときに使ったロープはどうやって回収を？
How would you get her up the rope and use it to climb the chandelier?
おバカさんですわね。そんなのいくらでも回収方法はありますわ。
Oh, you precious dimwit, you. There are so many ways one could collect it after the fact.
例えばもやい結びやスリップノットにすれば降りた後に引っ張ってほどくこともできる。今度ゆっくりと教えてあげるよ。
For example, if you use a bowline or slip knot, you can undo it by reaching the ground with a simple tug. I'll show you sometime. Whoa. Nice. I'm at a loss for how to respond when presented with these not options, as if they were obvious possibilities. Aside from armor, no one seems phased, as if it was just really common detecting knowledge. I really am terrifyingly out my depth here.
以上のようにして犯人は私たちがこの島を訪れるよりずっと前にトリックの準備を済ませ洋館を後にしたんだ。
Here you have it. The culprit finished their preparations long before you arrived on the island and put the manor behind them.
そして僕が扉を開いてトラップが作動したことでワイヤーは滑車装置で巻き上げられてローシ探偵の体を引き裂いたんですね。
Then I opened the door, triggering the trap, yanking the wire up with the pulley system and slicing senior detective apart. To think that someone could orchestrate such a kill while the victim remained down in the basement? Just can't fathom it. I feel a shiver down my spine at the hidden culprit's ingenuity as well as their barbarity.
なんと卑劣な犯行か。自分の手を汚さないばかりか、他者の手を借りて惨殺するなど許せないのである。
What a craven deed! Using another's hand instead of dirtying one's own to commit so heinous an act is beyond forgiveness.
僕がさっきエントランスホールで見つけた切れた絨毯の断片はワイヤーを地下から上に通していた証拠なんだよね。
So the torn piece of carpet found in the entrance hall was cut from the wire as it shot from the basement, right?
ええ、断面を調べてみましたが 100% ワイヤーによって切れたものです。
Correct. I analyzed the fragment and can test with 100% certainty that it was severed by the
お
wire.
そらく引っ張り上げられた際にワイヤーが床の隙間を通って移動し絨毯が切れたんです。今回の犯人の思考不足が伺えますね。
When the wire was pulled up through the gap, it shifted and sliced the carpet in one spot. Therefore, the culprit never did a trial run. So this culprit is really smart and knew already what the outlook looked like prior to anyone getting there, other than the killer.
証拠を残しすぎなのですわ。この偉大なるピンカートン家の後継ぎ家族探偵を相手取るには役者不足だったようですわね。
Oh, how sloppy it must be to leave so many clues. They never stood a chance of besting me prior to illustrious Pinkerton name.
だけど、それじゃあ誰が犯人なのだろうね。
The question remains: who's responsible for this?
それはおそらく扉を開いたそこの庶民ではありませんの。もともと怪しかったのですし。
Is it not clearly this commoner who opened the door? He was disreputable from the start.
いや、このトリックは準備さえ整えてしまえば、あとは誰かがこの洋館の扉を開くのを待つだけでいい。
No, once the trick was set up, the culprit would merely have to wait for someone to inevitably open the
つまり
door.
誰にでも犯行が可能なトリックなんだ。入り口を開いた張本人である無能君だけでなく、私たち探偵同盟のメンバーでもね。
In other words, it could have been anyone. Triggering a trap may make incompetent a prime suspect, but still one of our own.
ちょっと社畜さん、何をおっしゃいますの？私たちは今日本土から数時間かけてこの島に来たんですのよ。
Hold on here, workaholic. How could you possibly mean by that? We spent hours traveling here from the mainland today.
私たちに犯行など不可能に決まっていますわ。浅ましすぎる発言はたとえ庶民といえども許しませんわよ。
In what universe can any of us have been responsible for this crime? Your suggestion is deplorable even for a commoner.
研究棟の人らが殺されたのって1日以上前でしょ？だったら今集まってるうちらにも犯行は可能なんじゃね？
Those piece of snarks were killed like over a day ago, right? Doesn't that mean one of us could have done it back then?
この島の人たちを皆殺しにして老子探偵を殺すトリックを準備してから本土に戻って何食わぬ顔でうちらに合流する。
We could have wiped out everyone on the island, set up the trap, and then bounced to meet up with us and put on the innocent act. That's very true downtown.
もし犯人があの八つ咲き校ならそれくらい余裕でやるっしょ。
If the culprit's really a quartering dude, they could totally pull that
そ
off.
んな最低最悪なクソ野郎だからこそうちらはわざわざ集まったんだからさ。
Piece of trash is literally the worst. He's like the reason we have to be here in the first place.
そんな仲間同士で疑い合うだなんて。
The nerve. How dare they turn us on one another?
おいおい待ちなよ。もっと最悪なパターンがあるだろう。
Hey, now let's back it up a bit here. Something that makes this even worse, you know. Renegade Detective cuts in gleefully.
もっと最悪なパターン。それって何のことですか？
Even worse, how do you mean?
決まっているじゃないか。犯人を見つけ出せるならまだマシ。
Isn't it obvious? Things would be fine if we could still track down the
も
culprit.
っと最悪なパターンは犯人がすでに島から逃げ去っていることだよ。
The worst case scenario, they've already escaped from the island. The atmosphere tenses an instant, as much as we hope to believe otherwise as a possibility we couldn't ignore.
仮に今回の一連の犯行が八つ咲公の仕業だとしたら、すでに逃げ去っている方が現実的だよね。
If we're assuming there's a work of the quartering duke, isn't it only rational to conclude that he's booked it by now?
だって探偵同盟の本部を壊滅させることには成功。置き土産に老子探偵を殺害する罠まで残せた。
He successfully destroyed
どうして島に残る必要があるのかな。
He successfully destroyed HQ after all. He even left us with the parting gift of senior detective's murder West Day after
こ
that.
れならサクッと逃げちゃうな。そして戻ってこない。そうすれば疑われることもないんだもん。
If it were me, I'd hightail it the second I was able, never to return. That way I wouldn't be suspected. That is very true on Renegade's
よ
part.
ほど強い意志と目的でもない限りは。
Always had a strong motive to do otherwise, that is. No one can argue with Renegade's words. That's what it can take a homicidal maniac to give us a perspective on another. Just like he said, it'd be counterintuitive for a Cope to remain or even return to the island at this point.
それじゃあこの事件は
And then the case is...
ああ、誰にでも犯行が可能である以上、もう推理しようがない。完全に手詰まりってわけ。
Yup, if anyone's to blame, then we may as well be wild mass guessing. That's an impasse if I ever saw one. Examine everyone's faces again. Their eyes are filled with suspicion and hostility that wasn't there before. Maybe I could trust them just moments ago, but now a dark shadow hangs above us. If the corporal already fled, we'll never track down the senior detective's killer. But if they're still here, they could very well be among us. Either way, it's a bitter pill to swallow. Despite that, Team's morale has taken a hit.
顔を上げろ、探偵諸君。推理はまだ終わっていないぞ。
Stiff upper lip, ladies and gentlemen. This investigation hasn't ended yet. Home voice dispels the gloom.
確かに、この事件の真相はどうあがいても悲劇かもしれない。
It's true, regardless of our actions, the reality of the situation is a tragic
だ
one.
がそもそも探偵とは悲劇の後に必要とされる存在だ。 我々が悲劇を前に起こしてしまっては誰が立ち向かうというんだ。
However, it's a detective's duty to attend to the aftermath of any tragedy. If we hesitate, who will else take the mantle? Huh? Whole sense of winking my way before making her announcement.
この事件の犯人は一つ致命的なミスを犯してしまった。それを今から私が解き明かしてみせよう。
As mentioned previously, a culprit made one fatal error, which I shall now share with you
悲
all.
劇など我々の手で覆してやろうじゃないか。探偵諸君。
After all, reversing tragedies is precisely what we must do, ladies and gentlemen. The group falls silent, listening intently to what Ideal has to say. For this particular trick, anyone could have performed a killing act so long as the proper preparations were made. It's possible that perpetrators are already fled, though if they are still present, they could very well be part of the DA. How does Holmes intend to turn such a desperate situation around?
まだ自らの推理を話していない子がいるだろう。それが誰か無能君もわかるだろう。
I would say Workaholic has not shared their theory yet. Only someone has yet to share their theory. Incompetent, who you know to whom I refer, he does. The investigator who hasn't spoken yet is. Wait. Bookroom detective. Wait, she investigated the fireplace. Bookroom detective, this one.
文学さん、
Yes.
確かあなたはこの部屋の暖炉を見て何かに気づいた様子でしたよね。
Luke, you were looking at the fireplace when you noticed something,
あ
right?
なたは何に気づいたんですか？
What was it you saw?
こそこそと見ていたんですか。気持ち悪いです。死んでください。と、少女はロリコンとおぼしき少年へと蔑みの目を向けた。
So you spying on me then. Get lost and die, Humbert, said the girl to the preferred youth, who detest for him clear on her face.
いや、これはその
What did you know? That's not.
よさないか、文学探偵。
That's enough,
すま
Bookie.
ないな、無能探偵。この子は少々人付き合いが不慣れなんだ。
Apologies, incompetent. I'm afraid her social graces are a bit lacking.
全然気にしてないですよ。
No, don't worry about it. I get a strange laugh as I attempt to recover from the mental blow I was just dealt.
お前もずっと暖炉の件を話したがっていたじゃないか。みんなに話してやれ。
Were you dropping in the bit to tell everyone about the fireplace? Come on out and say it.
言われずともそのつもりですけど。と、少女は不満混じりの声で返事をし、解説を始める。
I attended to whether or not I was asked, helped the girl matter of factly before beginning her explanation.
私たちがこの部屋を訪れた際、暖炉に火が灯っていました。この点に違和感を覚え、ずっとその正体を探っていたのです。と
When you first
少女は自らの考えを口にした。
hurry up and speak. When we first entered, the fire was lit. Something felt off about this, so I began pondering the matter. The girl began.
違和感ですか？その正体って？
Something was off. What matter are you talking about?
この国では馴染みが薄く、知らないのも当然であろうが、暖炉の火というのはそう長く持たないんだ。
This style of hearth isn't commonplace in this country, so it's no surprise he would be unaware for these fires don't burn for long.
薪を頻繁に追加してやらなければ、6時間も持たない。よくて5時間といったところだろう。
Unless was edited regularly, they will not last more than 6 hours. Even 5 would be an exceptional amount of time.
そんなに頻繁な管理が必要なものなんですね。
So it really needs to be attended
で
to.
も、皆さんの中の誰かが寒いから火を灯したんじゃないですか？もう3月とはいえ、この島は肌寒いですし。
Isn't it possible someone started a fire because they were feeling cold? I know it's March, but this island gets pretty chilly.
殺人事件が起こった館の暖炉を勝手につける探偵がいるわけないでしょ、ロリコン野郎。と、少女は犯罪者予備軍の少年を罵倒した。
No, proper detective would use a fireplace and crime scene sexual deviant. So the girl chiding the would-be offender. My God.
それも
Oh, right.
文学探偵の言う通りだ。私たちの中に暖炉をつけようとする者はいない。
As that book he says, I doubt there is a soul among us who would use a fireplace in this
い
situation.
るとしたら犯人だけだ。犯人は何らかの理由を持って暖炉に火をつけた。そしてそれはこの数時間に起きた出来事なんだ。
The only individual who would is the culprit. They had some incentive to ignite these flames, and it happened in the last several hours.
二人ともいい点に気づいてくれたな。そう、その暖炉に火をつけてしまったことこそ犯人の失策の一つさ。
You both know something vital. The very act of lighting a fire was quite a blunder the perpetrators
おそら
have.
く暖炉の火の持続時間に関する知識がなかったのだろう。だからこそ警察にも暖炉に火をつけてしまった。いや、つけざるを得なかったんだ。
It appeared they were unaware of how long the fire would burn, but that's precisely why they lit it. There was no other choice.
つけざるを得なかった。
They had to light the fire.
ああ、このワイヤーを取り扱うのに必要なグローブを処分するためにな。
And they also disposed of the gloves necessary to manipulate the wire saw. Saying this, Holmes fishes a single black glove from her pocket and waves it at us.
君たちも知っての通り、今回の犯行に使われたワイヤーソーは切れ味が良すぎるゆえに特別製のグローブが必要だ。犯人は間違いなくこのグローブを所持していたことだろう。
As you all know, said wire saw is so fine that it requires specially made gloves to handle, which the culprit
ゆえ
possessed.
にこのグローブの所持がバレれば犯人として疑われる。かといって指紋のべったりついたグローブをどこかへ隠すのはリスクが高い。
Where did
だ
those
か
be
ら
found?
こうするしかなかったのさ。
Were these gloves to be found in any other person, the owner would be quite suspect. Ergo, the only recourse is to burn them. With it, Holmes flings the glove into the fireplace. Displacing the flames, hissing all the while, it might have been made of sturdy material, but it currently wasn't fireproof.
暖炉の中から焼け残ったグローブの残骸を見つけることもできましたよ。と、少女はリーダーへと報告した。
I managed to find the burnt remains of a glove in the fireplace, I reported to the chief.
あの火力で焼け残るとは炎の精霊イフリートとの交友を深めていなかったがゆえの失態か。
The glove didn't burn entirely, and despite the heat, perhaps forming a pact with the Ifris would have been better served them.
ちょっと意味不明なのでスルーします。と、少女は無視を決め込んだ。
That's funny. Not sure what that means, so we'll just ignore that I grow so dismissively.
素晴らしい発見だよ、文学くん。これで犯人がワイヤー用のグローブを処理するために暖炉をつけたことは確定した。
For our discovery bookworm, from this we can deduce that the culprit lit this fire in an attempt to dispose of the gloves.
では、このことからどんな事実が伺えるかな。魔界くん、君ならわかるだろ。
Now, what further conclusions can we draw? I'm sure you can tell us, Mystic.
無論だ。犯人がこの洋館を脱出できたならばグローブなど適当な場所に放ってしまえばいい。近くに海もあるのだからな。
Naturally, had his culprit escaped the manor, they could have discarded the gloves any number of ways, not least of which being the ocean. So, theory. Renegade. I know it's obvious, Renegade, blah blah blah, but Renegade did not go downstairs with us. He decided to stay upstairs because he was quote unquote bored. So let's just say Renegade lit this fire up, threw the gloves in there. I think he was bored. Becoming Renegade.
わざわざ洋館の中で処分したということは洋館の外に出られなかったということだ。
The fact that they attempted to do so within the manor instead suggests that a getaway is not in the cards. I can't say. I want to look at the log, which I don't remember how to do that.
グッド。その通りだよ、魔界くん。
Yeah, precisely so mystic. Look at something. Options, controls, backlog triangle. Okay. Because this one naturally had a culprit escape the manor. They could discard gloves in any number of ways, not least of which being the ocean. Like I said, it's
こ
true.
の洋館から研究棟までは一本道。道以外は断崖で、 とても人間は降りられない。
The slope path from Gormagast to Snarks is a straight shot. Apart from that, there is only a cliff no person can easily descend.
それに何より私たちが研究棟に到着してからこの数時間見張りを欠かさなかったが、洋館から脱出した者は皆無だった。
Most importantly, during the several hours after arrival, we've never failed to keep watch. Not one soul fled from the building.
この暖炉に火を灯した人はまだ館の内部にいるということですね。と少女はリーダーの言葉に納得するのであった。
Put it another way, whoever lit the fire is still inside the manor and we speak, said the girl, following the chief's logic.
この館の内部に
They're still inside a manor? Detectives catch each other suspiciously. Of course, why wouldn't they? If the culprit's still inside the manor, that means they're hiding within our group.
落ち着け、探偵諸君。確かに私たちの中に犯人がいるという事実は悲しいことだが、何よりも重大な事実がある。
Great calling, ladies and gentlemen. While it is dispiriting to have the culprit among us, there is one factor more critical than any other.
それは八つ崎公が確実にこの洋館の中にいるということだ。
The fact that the quartering duke is without question inside this very manor.
どうして言い切れるんですか？
But how can we be so sure?
君が現れたおかげだよ、無能君。
So thanks to your turning up here, incompetent.
僕がどういう意味ですか？
Me, what do you mean? Holmes chuckles lightly before continuing.
八つ崎公にとって君の存在はイレギュラーに違いないからさ。その証拠に八つ崎公は2つの致命的なミスを犯している。
The quartering duke, you see, did not account for your presence. Two fatal errors suggest this is the
一
case.
つは痕跡を残したこと。おそらく犯人の元々の計画では証拠など残さずに姿を消すつもりだったはずだ。
Usually, traces of the crimes who remained had it all gone accordingly. I suspect the original plan would leave no such
そう
evidence.
すれば下道君が言っていたように、もう八つ崎公が島から脱出したものと考えざるを得ない。推理のしようがなくなり、混乱に陥っていたからな。
Then, as Renegade pointed out, we would have assumed the Duke already escaped, throwing our investigation to disarray. I see, if the Duke's goal was to put us off the scent, there wouldn't have been any need to engineer such a complex murder. For all intents and purposes, this should have been an unsolvable case.
しかし、そこに無能君が現れ、予定よりも早くトラップを起動させてしまった上に、入り口で気絶してしまった。
But why not kill Incompetent? That makes no sense. However, Incompetent triggered the trap earlier than anticipated. What's more, he passed down their
も
entryway.
し仮に洋館内に犯人がいたとしたら、さぞ慌てたことだろう。なぜなら、この洋館は窓がすべてはめ殺しで、出るには唯一の扉をくぐるほかない。
The culprit was likely panicking inside the manor. With all the windows fitted, the front door was the only means of
な
escape.
のに、そこには男が倒れている。もし逃げるときに目覚めて顔を見られたら一巻の終わりだ。
I mean, Browdy says that they did say it takes 20 minutes from Snarks with the laboratory to Gormagast. And Rowdy said it takes her 10 minutes to run. She was the first one there. Maybe. So, I don't know. Was this boy unconscious by the door? The chance of him making catching them as they fled was too great of a risk.
殺そうにも実力も素性も不明。おとなしく身を隠すほかにない。さらにそこへ他の探偵たちまでやってきてしまう。
This is kind of far-fetched so far. With no knowledge of his background or ability, it would be unwise to try and kill him. As those were en route, the culprit opted to hide.
慌てた犯人は隙を見て暖炉で証拠だけ隠滅してしまった。どうだい？しっかりとした筋書きだろ。
Flustered, they saw their chance and used the fireplace as explosive evidence. Well, my deduction is quite sound, yes. No one contradicts Holmes' statements. He's right. If there was any irregularity in the culprit's plan, it would be me. I may lack experience and have failed to save Senior, but it seems to me that a major flaw was introduced in the murder's plan. It's a bit ironic, really.
その可能性があったか全然気づかなかったよ。
What can I say? I never considered that possibility.
わざわざ混乱を生む発言をしておいてよく言うな。どうせ最初から全て気づいていた上で場を混乱させたのだろ。このゲロめ。
You have some nerve saying that after all your misleading comments, I wish they still had this figured out. Besides, they're the pot anyway.
お待ちなさい。どうして八つ崎港の犯行だと言い切れますの？
No, wait just a moment. How can you be so certain that Quarter Duke is a culprit?
八つ崎港の犯行の特徴は常に被害者が2人同時に現れること。確かに研究棟のスタッフに多数の死傷者が出ていますけど、これまでの犯行とは全く。
Again, I agree with Pasha this. Quarter Duke kills 2 victims at a time. Senior Detective that's a random one to kill. If you're gonna kill Senior Detective, you gotta kill me. So, I think I brought that up when the Senior Detective died. I'm like, that's weird. It is very weird.
それが2つ目のミスなんだよ、家族くん。
There lies their second mistake, Posh. Posh falls silent. Holmes turns his gaze to me and smiles coldly before getting into the heart of the matter.
本来この扉を開けた者は罠に引っかかり、老子探偵と共に死ぬはずだった。
In the original plan, an individual who opened the door was intended to spring the trap and die alongside Senior Detective. But my guy dodged out of the way.
つまり本来殺すはずの2人目の犠牲者を出せなかったことこそが八つ崎港最大の失敗さ。
As to say, failing to produce a second victim was according Duke's greatest mistake.
なんですって？
Beg your pardon? Oh. I remember when the trap sprung, I felt a pain in my head that led me to avoid the trap. By all means, I should have died right then. That's correct. In other words, I nearly avoided a tragic fate as according Duke's latest victim.
はいはい。被害者が2人いたかもしれないからって、八つ崎港の犯行と断定するのは早計じゃないか？
Hold on, aren't we a bit quick to assume that this is what Duke's doing just because there could have been 2 victims?
模倣犯かもしれないだろ。
It may just be another copycat, you feel me?
分かっていながら尋ねるな、外道探偵。お前もシリアルキラーならわかるはずだろ。
Some ask the question you know the answer to, Renegade Detective. A fellow serial killer, such as yourself, ought to understand.
これはただのか乱を狙った犯行ではなく、宣戦布告だ。わざわざリスクの高い手段で老子探偵を惨殺してみせることで、八つ崎港は私たちにこう言っている。
It was not simply to sow the seeds of discord, it was his declaration of war. Killing senior in such a risky way is proof of that.
真相を解き明かしてみせろ。さもなくば、全員八つ崎にしてやる。
Reveal the truth or we'll all be dismembered. That is what he means to tell us.
面白くなってきたね。俺も全力で楽しませてもらうとするよ。
Things are getting interesting. I, for one, am ready to have a ball, my dear Holmes. When Renegade Detective satisfied, Holmes' class once turned attention back to her. So, again, Workaholic has not said anything useful since coming up here, other than it could be any of us. I'm still my suspicions on Workaholic.
では、今回の事件をまとめるとしよう。
Forget not to briefly summarize.
八つ崎港は私たちの訪れる数日前に島を訪れ、職員を全員殺害した。
According to came to the island a few days prior to arrival, murdering all personal precedent. Oh, you know what? I never saw this scene before. Ooh.
その後、シャンデリアと老子探偵とをワイヤーで結びつけ、罠が作動してシャンデリアが落下すれば、老子探偵が死ぬよう細工。洋館を後にした。
He affixed an detective to a chandelier, ensuring he'd be killed when he descended. Following that, the Duke left the manor.
後日、研究棟に私たちが訪れたところを見計らって、老子探偵の声で私に連絡。一部の探偵を洋館へと誘導する。
Later, when we were at the research facility, he sent a message to me using a singular voice, learning a portion of our group back to the manor.
そこで、扉を開いた探偵と老子探偵を同時に殺害し、二人の犠牲者を出すことで、八つ崎港の犯行であることを示唆。
In doing so, whoever opened the door to the manor would die at the same moment as senior detective, producing 2 victims, the Duke's modus
そ
operandi.
れと同時に、犯人である八つ崎港が島の外へと逃げ出せた可能性を示すことで、私たちを混乱に陥れる。
This was also meant to conceal the Duke's presence and facilitate his escape amidst the chaos, or so went the plan at least.
だが、そこでイレギュラーが生じる。それは
計画外の人物が計画外の時間に罠を作動させたことだ。
Well, this that exact moment when things went awry when a person individual triggered a trap earlier than expected.
そのイレギュラーのせいで犯人は洋館の外へ出られず、慌てて証拠隠滅を図った。その結果、不自然に暖炉に火が灯り、証拠品も焼け残ってしまった。
This deviation prevented the culprit from fleeing in their panic. They disposed of the evidence in the fireplace, but it didn't burn completely.
以上のことから八崎公が今どこにいるか、無能君、イレギュラーの主である君が結論を告げろ。
So concludes my synopsis. Now we must ask, where's the quartering Duke? Surely as an irregularity. You can tell it's incompetent. Wow. All three answers as he's still inside a manor. What great options. Let's go the bottom one.
八崎公はこの洋館の中にいます。
The quartering Duke's inside a manor.
その通りだ。八崎公は私たちのすぐそばにいる。
Precisely, the quartering Duke himself stands among our
無能
ranks.
君が生み出してくれたこの一筋の巧妙を逃すわけにはいかない。ここまではやられてばかりだったが、反撃開始といこう。
You must take advantage of this opportunity incompetence has granted us, having suffered blow after blow. It's now our turn to
私た
act.
ち全員で追い込んでやろうじゃないか。この嘘にまみれた悲劇を
Games
終
of
わら
flip.
せるためにね。
Games of flip. Let's bring an end to this tragedy drenched in deceit. Oh, we got it. Grave matters must. Change the essence and rank. Case or review. Senior detective culprits unknown. Dismembered by wire saw. The culprit killed the senior detective from afar by using a shadow trap and wire saw. The gimmick was set up in advance, making it hard to pin down the culprit. They remain unidentified, but must be inside the manor. So there is some culprit. Aw, what the hell?
りょう、でもまあ通り魔、事件の推理はここまでってことでよくね。
I can save. Thank God. Okay. Let's read this. Sure thing, girl, but can we put a pause on the whole investigation thing? Okay. Since we finally are able to save, this will be it for this episode. I hope you guys enjoyed this. And I hope you guys have a great day. Peace.